Hi, everybody, and welcome to Waldorf Live. I'm your host, Annette Gomez. Well, we are just weeks away from Election Day, and one of those hot button topics we've been talking about over the last few weeks is whether Charles County should become chartered or unchartered. We have several different opinions over the last couple of weeks, and today we're sitting down with Courtney Edmonds. Courtney is an attorney and the former chair on the Charles County Planning Commission. Welcome, sir.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
And you're in the hot seat today.
Yes, yes.
So, Courtney, tell me, because like I said, a lot of people have had their opinions about whether the county should be chartered or not. What say you? Because everyone's saying this is about accountability. What say you?
So when you look at, in terms of a lot of things that are going on in the county, fully understand why people want greater accountability. But I think when you look at the charter document itself, it doesn't really put us in a situation where we have greater accountability among the elected officials in the county. And for example, there is nothing in the charter that basically says that there's a feature in charter that we can't implement today. And so, for example, as many of the voters know, there is litigation going on where there's allegations about misconduct by one of the sitting Board of Commissioners members. And so if you just use that as an example and you say, does charter provide specific language and guardrails and internal controls to ensure that that situation doesn't happen again? And I think the answer is a resounding no. Because when you look at the conflicts of interest, when you look at the alleged discriminatory behavior, there is nothing in charter that either says that a person will be removed from office or that in certain circumstances the public has to be notified about the findings in those situations. And then with regard to accountability, although the charter does include a way to remove an elected official, it requires a supermajority of the council and approval by the county executive. However, think about elected officials and county councils and things of that nature. You have allies on those councils, so no council member could ever be removed from office so long as they have one ally. And at least one of the facts relating to the current litigation is that the subject of a previous investigation donated $5,000 to a campaign of someone running for a commissioner slot. So when you look at that situation, even with regard to things that led to the litigation, if those commissioners had been required to raise their hand and say, there's a potential conflict of interest, therefore I either can't vote or at least allow the Board of Commissioners to vote on whether they should vote, there's nothing in the charter that implements those types of simple fixes that are very common with regard to addressing conflicts of interest. So I think if I had to give the bottom line answer with regard to accountability, it's two-part. The first part is no, it doesn't prevent the situation that we're in right now. And then although it does include language there relating to accountability, I think when you look at it in many ways, it's easily overcome by traditional political alliances.
Okay, so are you saying that the language is not written the way it should be? Is that what your biggest concern is?
So when you look at language in terms of whether it's a regulation or especially as it relates to an ethics situation, generally when you look at ethical conduct and internal controls associated with ethical conduct, those ethical principles and controls are designed to deter, detect, and remediate misconduct. The deter and detect, there is nothing in the charter that adds any beef along those ways with regard to the ability to deter and detect. And then with regard to remediating it, the one option there is basically for removal. And again, when you think about removal, because of that possibility, it's a deterrent for any member of the council to propose someone for a removal. Because think about it, Annette, if you and I are on the council, you don't want to propose me for removal because you don't want me at some point proposing you for removal. And that goes for the whole council. And then again, I think when you look at perhaps unintended consequences of the way it's structured there, it incentivizes, even as you're a candidate, to make sure that you have a strong alliance with at least either one other sitting member of the council when you're on. So although there's language there that allows for removal, it's just like the lottery. There's language there that says if you pick these 5 numbers and the Powerball, you'll win. But again, the odds of that happening are very slim.
So as it stands today, what do you think chartering, how would it affect local governance if it stands the way?
So that's a really good question, because I think if you were going to give an objective answer, I'm here as a voter, a concerned resident, if you were going to say how chartering would affect that, I think you would need to go all the way back to before charter. And what I mean by that is, if there was some sort of problem, situation, or opportunity that was foreclosed upon because of our current form of government, in that situation, if you undertook an analysis of the alternatives resolving that problem, you would have a full understanding of the attributes of the problem, the alternatives to be able to address that problem, and then that way when the voters go to the polls, they could determine, okay, I'm voting because charter addresses those kind of well-stated problems. Since we don't have an understanding of what the problem or problems were, it's very hard for me or anyone else to sit here and say charter will address those problems because we don't know what those problems are. I've asked the charter board president, to explain that. I've looked, if you run a search online, charter Charles County, and you read through the FAQs, there is nothing there that provides any type of statement of the problem and potential alternatives to address it. Because think about it, a savvy voter who has been in a role that has had to address any kind of problem-solving issue, they would want to know is, okay, what's the analysis of alternatives? And at least one question that I've heard repeated many, many times is, why can't these problems be resolved right now? There is nothing under state law, local law that says Charles County can put in place some sort of accountability measures right now. There is nothing under state law that says Charles County can't put in place an inspector general right now. So it begs the question, if we have a problem, why can't we address it right now instead of having to vote on it and then it not taking place until 2 years down the line?
Well, what if somebody says, Courtney, that's simple semantics, because we've been here before, because this is the third time. So obviously something's wrong, I think. What do you say to those voters that are saying
Well, I think it's obviously something's wrong. I think there's a lot of things that are in play that animate Charles County politics in general. And I think one of that relates to the development of the county. I think when you look at the charter proposal back in 2014, you look at the charter proposal right now, you'll see that a lot of the same campaign donors, whether it's construction companies, real estate organizations, development organizations, their money was involved then and their money is involved now. So the mere fact that we're pushing for charter doesn't mean that we have a problem with the structure of governance. I think when you look at charter, at least one way to view it is that, there are lobbyists, there are special interests that want to have a powerful county executive that can help them get their way. And so when you look at that, you say on the one hand, you say there's a problem that needs to be fixed. If, as some view, the problem we have in Charles County is that you have unconstrained development that's adversely impacting commutes on a daily basis, adversely impacting property values, that doesn't necessarily mean that our current form of government is failing. I think there needs to be at least some sort of analysis as to whether or not our leadership is failing the residents by acting in the best interests of the development community and the real estate community versus the residents. Because without regard to charter, if you take a poll, doesn't matter what race, ethnic group, political party, things of that nature, you ask people in Charles County, are you happy with the way your property value has increased compared to other jurisdictions? Are you happy with engaging in vehicle-to-vehicle warfare on Route 5 and Route 210 every day? And are you happy with the way Waldorf looks in terms of infrastructure and things of that nature? I think many residents, probably a majority of the residents, are uncomfortable with the way our county has evolved in that sense.
Yes, and again, and let me interrupt you for a second, because I was told when I moved here, you're going where? That's nothing but rural area. So this place has expanded.
Yes.
And so I guess my thought was, wouldn't we need the charter to help with that growth and with that expansion?
The increased traffic on those roads is outside of that subdivision that affects all of us. And so when you look at the development process, for example, if you have a developer that's in Montgomery County, lives in Potomac, nice house in Potomac, they build a subdivision down here in Waldorf. Once that subdivision's done and turned over to residents, they're back in Potomac, they're back relaxing in their part of the world, and the rest of the county in Charles County is paying for the increased adverse impact. But again, in terms of the development community, it's very easy for them to build more because in many cases they don't live here and they're only stuck with the costs of designing, developing, and selling the community. Once that last sale is made, they're on to the next project. And so again, coming back to charter, I think, again, there's a reasonable debate where one is the executive may, at any time, alter, adjust, modify, or in any manner change the structure, functions, powers, and duties of any department, agency, or office under the executive's control. That's very broad power. And pardon me using slang here, the executive writes a check that his or her behind can't cash, right? They either promote some other people, they move some things around within a department, and it creates an expectation when the next budget cycle comes around, he or she is saying, we set it up this way, we've got it in line, this is working well. It sets up a dispute between the council and the executive. And then also, when you look at in terms of, we talk about ethics, we talk about accountability, we talk about transparency, when you put, there is nothing in that language there that basically says, for certain actions, the county executive is going to coordinate these things with council, right? And then also when you look at this language in the charter that basically says, to the extent that there are any existing laws, ordinances, things of that nature, if they're inconsistent with charter, they are repealed. There's no listing in charter that basically says what is repealed. Power can be exercised in a way that's good for the county. Power can be exercised in a way that is corrupt and basically benefits only a limited number of people, not generally county residents. So I think when you look at that range, going from corruption on one side to effective leadership on the other side, two things come into play. One is there a way that the commissioner president today could be granted more authority over various county functions without giving him such broad authority and at least retaining the checks and balances from having a board of commissioners? Can we implement that today? Or then two, even in terms of a charter, that, can there be some additional controls that, again, where you're not, say you're repealing all these different laws. You and I have no way to know today which laws will be repealed and how that will impact a county executive, whether that will provide additional guardrails, will that provide additional controls. They will not see any type of analysis on there that basically says these other counties with similar attributes, this is how charter helped them move from one situation to another. Because again, I'm not aware, and I've asked, the charter board president about this. We haven't had a clear understanding of the problem. So again, you and I or anyone else saying, will charter solve all problem? I don't think the answer is yes, because 10 other counties did it. I don't think that's the answer. And I don't think you can really come to an accurate and objective answer. I think if the charter board had a full understanding of a publicly available statement of the problem, and so that's one, just a clear understanding of the problem. And then if charter board had been tasked to go out and not just basically sell charter and get comments about the inevitable drafting of the charter.
You see it completely negatively accepting.
No, it's not.
Charles County.
It's not negatively accepting Charles County. I'm just saying that you look at a basic, objective, even if it's a non-political situation, a problem-solving process.
Okay.
As I mentioned before, with the cheeseburger and fries analogy, the charter board was tasked to go draft a charter. Anyone could look on, you run Charles County Charter, go on the webpage, you look under FAQs. It doesn't say the problem, it just basically says the commissioners voted in light of the information, evidence put on the table, that they made a decision about that, right? You don't have that. So in terms of transparency, we don't have a clear understanding of what, many of the Board of Commissioners feel about charter, why it's better than others. We don't have that for all the commissioners. I think Commissioner Bowling has put out something, I think Commissioner Stewart has, but the three proponents of charter, they haven't, at least in writing, where every resident in the county can see. So again, that's inconsistent with transparency and accountability, because it's transparent if we see what the process was, we see what information was presented to them, and we see what vote they cast in light of that information, and then accountability when the elections come up in 2026, instead of kind of, looking at transitioning in the charter. Charter is a complicated issue. And I think, when I mentioned here when I was talking, I referred back to the Charles County page. I think it's important to look at the document and question the inputs in those documents. The document in terms of how it's been sold by the charter board and other people in the community is that it provides for engagement, transparency, and accountability. What I'm saying here today to you as a voter is to think about whether or not the problem has been accurately presented. When you look at accountability, as I mentioned before, there is a process in the charter that basically says with a supermajority of the commissioners, meaning you have 4 of the council that vote to remove, that can happen. But again, the executive has a lot of leeway to reject that proposal for any reason or no reason, and then all you need is one friend. So I think the charter fails in terms of accountability, because if you're looking at, okay, how do I avoid being removed, it's donate to a fellow council member's campaign. It all comes down to, we do live in a democracy. And so it's a lot of people, people have gotten personal, people take positions on these types of things. We're in a democracy, and I'm looking forward to the vote. And once the vote's cast, that's it.